Welcome. In the previous video we cleaned up some of the parser code, and in this one we are going to add some function parameters and return types. By the end of this video we'll be able to parse something like this. In this case I decided to add the function arguments as a tuple, then a right arrow, then another tuple for the return types. So the first thing we need to do is to add some new tokens, in this case a comma and a right arrow. To do that there is nothing special, we can just add their kinds. And then in the tokenizer.h file we can discode. Once again, do not forget that since we are using string views, we can have multi-character symbols. Now we need to create some AST nodes for them, and in here we are just going to be parsing these as a variable declaration and this as a simple type. So we can create their kinds and we can add their values. Type is just going to be a string v for now, and then variable declaration is going to be a struct. This struct is going to contain a name and a type. As usual, you can create the two constructors for type and variable declaration. Once again, there is nothing special in this implementation. And now we can update the function definition to also contain some parameter and return types. Since we updated this structure, we now need to update the constructor by just adding these two new fields. Now I want to introduce the concept of a parser, that is a function that accepts a tokens pointer and returns AST pointer. And I want to use this typedef to create a function called AST collect tuple that is going to collect all of the elements inside a tuple using this parser. As usual, you can begin this function by asserting that the first token is a left parenthesis because the tuple begins with left parenthesis, and in this case we are returning a sharp pointer that represents an error. Then we can begin our loop. Inside the loop we can call our parser, and if the AST the parser returned is null, we can break the loop. If parser returned a valid AST, we can append it to the result. Then we need to check if we reach the end of the tuple by using the token asKind prefix. If that's the case, we can break the loop, otherwise we must expect a comma. Note that in this case, we are returning a string to represent an error. Finally, after the loop, we need to expect a right parenthesis. Once again, we are returning an error using a string. Now inside our parser, we need to modify this parse definition function. Let's begin by deleting all of these if statements and replacing it by another if statement that now checks if a function begins by an ID, then a double colon, and then a left parenthesis. We are going to advance the name of the function and the double colon. Then we are going to use the function we just created to collect all of the parameters. Note that if the error is not null, we inject it into the error message. After that, we can safely expect a right arrow. Then we can do the same thing for the return types using the AST collect tuple while function. After that, we expect a left brace for the beginning of the body of the function. Then we collect all of the statements inside the body of the function. We expect a right brace at the end of the body of the function. And now we can create a new function definition using this function. Let's create this function first. This function is called AST new function definition. It's just a constructor. You can see that the body of this constructor is nothing special. Now inside our parser file, once again, you can see that we have these two new functions, the parse variable declaration and the parse type function. Let's create them. These functions are going to be very similar to the parse expression function. As you can see, we just need to create the AST new variable declaration from tokens and the AST new type from tokens functions. The signature of these functions is once again very simple. We can add them to the ast.h file, and they both do what you expect them to do. Now inside the main.c file, we can uncomment out this dump AST and comment the writer program to C. We must not forget to update the dump AST function by adding the AST declaration, AST type, and then adding the extra fields to the AST function definition printing. In this case, parameters, return types, and statements. We must not forget to include stdbool in ast.h. And here I'm going to make a slight change in the parser.h file by moving this function, parser advanced token kind, into the token.h file. We can add its signature and then the implementation. We must not forget to replace the old usage by the new one inside the parser.h file. We can now comment out the last two lines in the script. And finally, we can just run it. As you can see, we have a function definition for the name f with two parameters, x and y of type int. Then we have two return types, int, and then we have one statement inside it, a function call of printf with the string hello YouTube. If we modify the signature of the function and run the code once again, you can see that now the parameters are different. We have three of them, two ints and one string, and we also have three return types, two integers and one float. And this is how you extend the function definition signature to accept parameters and return types. In the next video, we'll be compiling them into C code.